Hello and welcome, I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Pakistan breaks the 2021 ceasefire for a seventh straight night as India closes its airspace for Pakistani flights after the deadly Pahalgam attack. Islamabad warns of a strong response if India escalates the hostilities, while blaming New Delhi for provocations amid rising border tensions. The United States and Ukraine signed a landmark deal to jointly develop energy and mineral resources, crucial for war recovery and military aid. Washington also launches a reconstruction fund as part of a strategic push to counter China's control of critical minerals. North Korea begins building its first road bridge to Russia, calling it a major step in bolstering ties amid growing military cooperation. The move comes as Pyongyang confirms troop support for Russia in Ukraine, deepening their strategic alliance despite global sanctions. The Kremlin says the Russian President Vladimir Putin is open to peace with Ukraine, but warns against rushing a deal as fighting intensifies on the ground. Ukrainian forces say Russian attacks are escalating, even as Putin claims Kyiv troops remain trapped in Russia's Kursk region. US Defense Chief Pete Hegseth warns Iran of consequences for backing Houthi attacks, even as nuclear talks quietly resume. 3 rounds of indirect talks mediated by Oman aim to stop Iran from going nuclear while easing sanctions. Israel carries out a strike in Syria against extremists attacking the Druze following deadly sectarian violence near Damascus. Syria rejects foreign intervention, claiming to protect all groups, including the Druze, amid the escalating conflict. Columbia student Mohsen Dawawi is released on bail after a judge blocks the Trump administration's move to deport him for pro-Palestinian protests. The West Bank-born refugee was detained during his US citizenship interview, but now fights to stay in Vermont. US President Donald Trump says Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney wants a trade deal and will visit the White House within a week. Trump also says he congratulated Carney on his election win during a call on Tuesday. Tensions between India and Pakistan continue to escalate following the deadly Pahalgam terror attack. Pakistan has violated the ceasefire along the line of control for the 7th consecutive night, with small arms fire targeting multiple sectors in Jammu and Kashmir. In response, India has closed its airspace to all Pakistan-owned flights, a reciprocal move after Pakistan imposed a similar ban on Indian carriers. India's foreign minister has demanded that the perpetrators of the Pahalgam attack be brought to justice. Pakistan, however, denies involvement and warns of a strong response to any escalation by India. The country's deputy prime minister has said that any further provocation will be met decisively. On the diplomatic front, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif accused India of provoking tensions during a call with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Meanwhile, Rubio urged Pakistan to condemn the attack and cooperate in the investigation. As these developments unfold, both countries continue their nightly exchanges of fire, with the international community calling for a de-escalation. We are joined by Major General Dhruv Khatok, defence expert located in New Delhi, to discuss this in more detail. General Khatok, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. General, it's the 7th night we've seen exchanged fire between the line of control. Do you think it's time for India to reassess the understanding of the 2021 ceasefire and maybe officially declare it void?
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, I think the time has come really, because the ceasefire has been to the advantage of Pakistan all these years. You will recall that the drones have been coming in with ammunition, and with weapons and with drugs from across the line of control. And they have been, it has been done deliberately by the Pakistani establishment. They had military assistance for that. In addition, terrorists have been continuously being pumped in by Pakistan across the line of control. So once you are sending in drones and sending in terrorists, I really don't see what the sanctity of the ceasefire is all about. At some point of time, this 2021 ceasefire, I think, which has held so far, it is held basically because India is holding it. But I think now the time has come and India should perhaps call it off completely. As it is in the last 7 days, the firing which is going on, this is a direct provocation by Pakistan. I feel this provocation is being done to sensitize the world community and get them to act to prevent a bigger attack by, or to prevent a major escalation by India, which we are going to do at some point of time. The Prime Minister has said that there will be consequences for what has happened in Pahalgam, and I think it is in fear of that Pakistan is ratcheting up tensions in the along the LOC to prevent that occurrence happening. Thomas.
Major General Katok, we've obviously seen some comments from US Secretary of State Marco Rubio today. Do you think India is satisfied with the international response so far, or is the world looking the other way on cross-border terrorism and not concentrated enough on this potential escalation?
You see, the question is, India has already given out its stance. Now, once the attack took place, all the world leaders, especially the major powers like the United States, they unequivocally condemned that attack, right? And they have also spoken to the heads of states have spoken to the Indian Prime Minister. And I don't think there is any country in the world which thinks that there will not be a response. There will be an Indian response. There is absolutely no doubts about that. And it is a justified response. So I think the world understands that. And we will await as to, regardless of what the world says now, India's response is going to take place. The timing has been left to the military as to what we are going to do. But that response will be there. Now, post that, how Pakistan reacts, we will see, because that is what is going to lead to escalation, not the Indian response as of now.
We have seen India close its airspace to Pakistan-owned carriers today. This is obviously a reciprocal move from India. How effective is this move, and can we see any other diplomatic measures being taken by India towards Pakistan?
Well, no, I think the diplomatic measures which we had to take have already been taken. Further measures will simply be to sensitize world opinion as to what Pakistan is doing. Otherwise, we have closed the border. We have sent back their citizens. We have held in abeyance the Indus Water Treaty, etc., etc. So those are those economic and diplomatic measures which have already been taken. But closing this airspace was simply a reciprocal step. Pakistan closed the Indian airspace, and we have closed theirs. For India, there is a very marginal impact of Pakistan closing the airspace. For Pakistan, the consequences, I think, will be far more severe. So while we have closed this airspace now, I feel it should have been done a few days earlier. It should have been done immediately after Pakistan closed airspace for Indian carriers.
Major General Katok, thank you very much for joining us on the programme and for your insight. We now move over to the United States, where they have signed a deal with Ukraine on the joint application of its energy and mineral resources after months of tense negotiations. The two countries have agreed to establish a reconstruction investment to spur Ukraine's economic recovery from its war with Russia. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it showed both sides were committed to lasting peace and prosperity in Ukraine. For Kyiv, the deal is seen as essential to accessing US military aid. According to the statement from the US Treasury on Wednesday afternoon, the newly created US-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund recognizes the significant financial and material support the US has given Ukraine since Russia invaded in February of 2022. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Yulia Svyatdenko, who flew to Washington to ink the deal on Wednesday, said in a post on X that the new fund would attract global investment into our country. Listing the deal's provisions, she said it would involve projects in minerals, oil and gas, although the resources would remain the property of Ukraine. The minister also reiterated that the partnership will be equal on a 50-50 basis. She added further that the deal will be first ratified by Ukrainian lawmakers.
President Trump's tireless efforts to secure a lasting peace, I am glad to announce the signing of today's historic economic partnership agreement between the United States and Ukraine, establishing the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This partnership allows the United States to invest alongside Ukraine to unlock Ukraine's growth assets, mobilize American talent, capital, and governance standards that will improve Ukraine's investment climate and accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery.
In a related development, President Putin has announced a 3-day ceasefire from May the 8th to May the 10th to mark the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union and its allies' victory in World War II. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, however, is calling for an immediate ceasefire lasting at least 30 days. Putin is open to peace in Ukraine and intense work is ongoing with the United States, he claims. However, the conflict is so complex that the rapid progress seems very difficult. President Donald Trump, who says he wants to be remembered as a peacemaker, has repeatedly expressed his desire to bring an end to the bloodbath of the war in Ukraine, which is now in its 3rd year. Let's take a listen in to what the Russian foreign minister had to say.
Наше предложение, которое президент Путин озвучил, это начало прямых переговоров без предварительных условий. Перемирие в данной ситуации рассматривается как предварительные условия, которое будет использовано для дальнейшей поддержки киевского режима, укрепления его военных способностей. Помните, когда перемирие, которое предложил президент Трамп в виде моратория на удары по объектам энергетической инфраструктуры, и которое полностью было соблюдено в течение 30 дней российской стороной, оно никак не повлияло на агрессивные действия киевского режима. Нарушений было, по-моему, пара сотен.
On April the 26th, the Kremlin claimed that Russian forces had fully recaptured the territory of Kursk Oblast. However, despite this declaration of victory, President Vladimir Putin acknowledged a day before that Ukrainian soldiers still remain in the region, according to Russian state-controlled media. Speaking at an event in Moscow, Putin further stated that the remaining Ukrainian forces are requesting evacuation from their commanders. They've been pushed out of Kursk Oblast, but remnants are still hiding in cracks and basements are asking to be evacuated. That is what the Russian president said. While truce talks continue, Russian drones attacked Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa today, causing fires, damaging homes and infrastructure. There's no word yet on casualties. Meanwhile, Ukraine's top military commander, Alexander Syrsky, said that Russian forces have greatly increased their attacks in eastern Ukraine despite ongoing truce discussions. We move on to another related development. North Korea is calling the construction of its first road bridge to Russia a big step forward in their relationship. State media in North Korea says construction started on Wednesday on the new bridge, which will cross the Tumen River in the northeast of the country. It will be built near the Friendship Bridge, a Soviet-era rail bridge that is the only current land link between Russia and North Korea. Russia's Kommersant newspaper reports that the bridge should be finished by mid-2026. This comes right after North Korea confirmed it has sent troops to help Russia in its war against Ukraine. The new bridge is the latest sign of deepening ties between the two heavily sanctioned countries, which have drawn closer since 2022. We are joined by Professor Dr. Veselin Ivanov-Popovsky to discuss this in more detail. Professor Popovsky, thank you very much for joining us as always. What do both of these heavily sanctioned countries have to benefit from each other's relationship? We obviously have said previously that North Korea did send Russia troops to help in its fight against Ukraine. A severe public warming towards each other here.
Certainly what we have seen over the last hours is a historic signature of a long-term reconstruction and investment fund for Ukraine, which happened in Washington, D.C. with the Ministry of Economy, Yulia Sviridenko, flying over there to sign the deal. And it looks into the future of reconstruction and investment in Ukraine. By the way, some of the rare minerals in Ukraine are very useful for the future industries, for batteries in electric vehicles, for airplanes, for weapons, and many things else. So the United States benefit really from those access to Ukrainian minerals. And in exchange, what Ukraine gets here is a huge investment. They're talking of hundreds of billions of not only US money, but global fund, with the sanction on any entity, state or person who financed the Russian war machine. So no single person or state that financed the Russian war machine has any access to that deal. So effectively, this is kind of a Marshall Plan, I will call it, for Ukraine, a very significant development. And obviously, it also includes security guarantees, because nobody will put not billions, but even thousands of dollars without any security guarantees in Ukraine. And most interestingly, some of those minerals are in the land occupied by the Russian Federation. And Yulia Sviridenko very clearly said 350 billion in minerals are in the Russian occupied territory. So when United States, when Donald Trump talks about returning some money, the message is get the Russians out of our territory, explore the minerals there in Donbass, currently occupied by the Russians, and get your money back. So it's a significant development over the last 24. It has been discussed and has been negotiated for some time, we know that. In the Vatican meeting, the two presidents, Zelensky and Trump, effectively agreed verbally on the deal, and yesterday that deal was signed in Washington. For North Koreans, for Iranians, and for Chinese, this means a very clear message that they cannot do anything anymore.
Yes, Dr. Popovsky, I now want to move on to this new bridge that's being built between North Korea and Russia. How do you think the international community should respond to this? Mainly the US, South Korea, Japan, people who want to prevent North Korea's influence in that region.
Yes, it is a concern. You're absolutely right, Thomas. But again, North Korea is very clear on the side of Russia. It's not a news. They develop even a stronger relationship over many years and decades. It's a concern, but again, the only response of the rest of the world, you mentioned South Korea, Japan, they will be very much involved in those negotiations of how to counterbalance the bridge between North Korea and Russia here. And hopefully, again, United States can get very involved. It's a Pacific region. It's very crucial for United States national interest and for other countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and many others in the Pacific. So the counterbalance should be there. Even mathematically, we can calculate how those countries can respond. North Korea is a big country with some potential, but obviously there are much stronger economies in the region.
Dr. Ivan Popovsky, thank you very much for your insight as always. Let's now move over to North America, where the US economy has unexpectedly shrunk in the first quarter of this year, as the nation's GDP contracted by 0.3%. This marks the first quarterly decline since 2022. A surge in imports driven by stockpiling ahead of Donald Trump's new tariffs is being blamed for the downturn. The US Commerce Department also pointed to a drop in consumer and government spending, while some economists say private investment could help the economy rebound soon. President Trump is shifting the blame to his predecessor. Speaking at a cabinet meeting, Trump called the contraction Biden's economy, adding that the GDP decline reflected distortions from imports and government spending. Let's take a listen in to what the US president said.
Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today, and I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is the quarterly numbers, and we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country in so many ways, not only at the border was more up.
Trump's approval rating has recently taken a hit, with recent polls showing a decline in his economic approval to just 36%. Despite this, he remains optimistic, telling business leaders that growth is just around the corner. Trump is now asking for a little bit of time as he works to address these economic challenges. Let's take a listen in.
In the first quarter GDP numbers just out today, core GDP, now we're removing distortions from imports, inventories, and government spending, was up plus 3%. But this is Biden's economy because we took over on January 20th. And I think you have to get us a little bit of time to get moving. But this is the Biden economy. But we still had and we've had a lot of things happen since November 5th that helped this economy.
The US president also announced on Wednesday that a tariff wall will be imposed on pharmaceutical companies operating in the US after a set period. The move aims to boost domestic production and reduce reliance on foreign drug manufacturers. Meanwhile, Trump also acknowledged that his tariffs could lead to higher prices and fewer products for American consumers, suggesting children might have 2 dolls instead of 30. Trump insisted China would suffer more from the trade war and tried to reassure the public that a recession isn't looming. Here's what Trump said.
Look, right now, and I told you before, they're having tremendous difficulty because their factories are not doing business. They made $1 trillion with Biden, $1 trillion, even $1.1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, and maybe the 2 dolls will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. But we're not talking about something that we have to go out of our way. They have ships that are loaded up with stuff, much of which, not all of it, but much of which we don't need. And we have to make a fair deal. We've been ripped off by every country in the world, but China, I would say, is the leading candidate for the chief ripper offer.
Meanwhile, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum praised US President Donald Trump's decision to soften tariffs on automakers, calling it a positive step in avoiding a trade war. She highlighted that the new rules would provide Mexico with a competitive advantage under the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, as vehicle tariffs would be reduced if parts were produced in Mexico or Canada. Sheinbaum emphasized that the changes recognize the value of the trade agreement, particularly as Mexico has become the US's largest trading partner. Listen in to what the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has said.
Porque nuevamente hay un reconocimiento pues del valor del tratado comercial México-Estados Unidos-Canadá.
Staying in the region now, US President Donald Trump says his administration may stop providing grants to Harvard University, citing the institution's refusal to comply with his demands. During a conversation with Education Secretary Lyndon McMahon, Trump commented that federal grants are at the government's discretion. Let's take a listen in to what he said.
She's been incredible. She's very upset with Harvard. They have $53 billion in a fund, and yet they want more grants. And it looks like we're not going to be giving them any more grants, right, Linda? And, a grant is at our discretion, and they're really not behaving well, so it's too bad.
The Trump administration has increased investigations into the university. It recently began reviewing nearly $9 billion worth in federal funding and demanded changes to campus policies on diversity, equity and inclusion and pro-Palestinian groups. Harvard has strongly opposed these measures, arguing that free speech and academic freedom are undermined. The tensions largely stem from pro-Palestinian protests on campus, with the administration accusing the university of supporting anti-Semitism, while Harvard defends its students' rights to express their political views. Staying once again in the region, Donald Trump has suggested he may take legal action against the New York Times. He has accused the paper of misrepresenting his lawsuit against Paramount, the parent company of CBS. Posting on his Truth Social platform, Trump claimed the New York Times is reporting accounts to tortious interference, a legal term for intentionally damaging business relations. His lawsuit stems from a 2024 interview aired on 60 Minutes with Vice President Kamala Harris, which he claims was edited to omit embarrassing responses. According to reports, Paramount is considering a settlement to ease the sale of the company. Trump, however, has denounced media outlets that label his case as baseless, insisting it has legal merit. He further asserts that the New York Times should face consequences for what he describes as potentially unlawful conduct. But that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.